Neil, it's so great to see you again after we had that fabulous conversation with David a few weeks ago. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, it is my pleasure. An honor to be on your show. It was fun to be on that podcast, and you have an excellent podcast in the era of podcasts that we are in. And so, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny too that that was really how we had our first conversation was with David because David was one of the first art podcasters. I think he's had a podcast for so long and he reached out to me and it was this moment where I felt like, oh my gosh, like this is happening. And this guy who's been doing it and has a great conversations about painting has seen what I've done. So it's kind of this really nice circle that is happening of just being able to connect with artists around the world and have conversations about what's happening in your studio.
Yeah, again, thank you. You do an amazing service to us all.
Thank you. Um,
Mhm.
so, we have been able to have a really great conversation with David and before we jumped on here. But one thing that we didn't really get into that I always love hearing about from artists is, just a bit of your background, like where you're from, what your interests were, and how you started to get into painting.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, actually. Like the how I got into it
Mhm.
kind of thought. And I don't think there's any art gene or anything like that, but I do wonder about a sort of genetic disposition towards the arts. Like sometimes I think maybe when I was a embryo fetus, some of the growth juices, a little extra went to my eyeballs or something because I see well. And I was like, did that maybe lead to me being a painter? I don't know. It certainly made certain things come easier. Uh, so maybe that's a story I tell myself that might be totally fiction, but that's how we make sense of childhood. And then there's like, childhood experiences and what happened, what could happen to direct someone to an art path. Um, so again, the story I tell myself is like, I was a pretty sporty kid. Um, I was a very sporty kid actually for a while. And then in fifth grade, I got sick. I had this whole autoimmune thing, Crohn's disease and appendicitis. And weirdly, I had shingles really bad as a kid. And I weakened and I was inside a lot and I read a lot of books. And I wonder if that shifted my mindset towards just towards more of an intellectual pursuit or something. Um,
Hmm.
and then I also make sense of it like there's that John Quincy Adams quote, and it goes like, I was a warrior so that my son could be a merchant, so that his son could be a poet. And that resonates with me. It didn't happen exactly in just 3 generations or something, but I do feel like benefiting from this, my ancestors coming over here and working hard and laboring, and then grew up. My upbringing was pretty comfortable in Louisville, Kentucky, a stable household with sisters and dogs, and I definitely didn't have that feeling of desperation or anything. I was pretty comfortable, um, pretty engaged with what I was doing, and then maybe daydreamy. That could be afforded. I was afforded to, I could just daydream. I wasn't worried about things. And then I was very active in like scouts and the church as a kid. I sang in the choir and I was a Boy Scout all the way to Eagle Scout. And I used to like kind of be embarrassed to that in the art world. But actually that's just me. I'm owning it now. I can't help it.
I love that.
I
Own
like
it.
I like to prepare and to make sure that the troop is all in alignment, everyone's sort of working together kind of thing. And like a general service to the community, I think came with scouting as well. And all that added up somehow to when I started in college. I knew it was painting somehow amidst all that. I went to an arts magnet high school in Louisville. So there was that, a public school, but it had a good arts program. And then I knew it was painting. And somehow I sensed maybe the depth there, the complexity, like it just had me. It had its grip on me, the whole history, and then it's the use of materials, and then it's a little bit of aesthetics, well, a lot of bit of aesthetics and kind of poetry. It just seemed deep. And I maybe had somewhat of a natural ability, like I was pretty good at drawing straight out of the gate. And then but also I could tell that my paintings were bad. Like I was like, I have these moments of like, wow, look what I did. I can tell there's something good there, but then also enough sense to just think, well, also as paintings go, that's pretty bad. Maybe good for a student, but bad ultimately. And so that really kept me hooked, like that it was not something that I was going to be able to master, ever. I still feel that way.
I actually love you sharing that part, because I think that's what really hooked me into painting. Was it was something I loved so much doing, and yet there was like always this war happening on my canvas, I felt, and so I loved these depths that I could go to that were opposite in the same area, which I think relates a lot to love. There's a
Yeah.
passion there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's messy and complex and reveals all of your fallacies and weaknesses. And I just felt it just felt like a framework that I could just live in.
I thought it was interesting too that you brought up what happened to you in fifth grade, where you ended up having to spend a lot of time at such a young age, essentially probably self-reflecting in a way, because you didn't have the ability to do the things that you were doing before. And I'm currently reading this book. It's called Between Two Kingdoms, and it's about a young woman like at 21 who gets leukemia, and she is discussing the same thing and about how she feels like it brought her to the arts. She met like this motley crew of sorts of, these artists and poets and tattoo artists and all this stuff who all have cancer, and how having it actually strengthen their art, because there is so much time where you're not being pulled away, going here, doing that, So I think that's really interesting to hear about your experience.
Yeah, and just being inside, I thought there's something about that kind of reflection, working on us, working on things, not working on as a team or working on big projects, but focusing in on a piece of paper as a kid or something like that. I think it did something to my brain. I don't know what exactly, but there was something about that.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think, like we have these, like we were discussing earlier, when you're in the middle of it as a child, you don't know what the outcome
Right.
be, but it's, one foot in front of the other, one action leading to another response. And then here you are, making these incredible paintings that reflect on being in many ways for me when I look at them, and what it means to see. I love what you're talking about with having really great eyesight. I think that's something I really appreciated in your paintings and looking at them, is this sense of looking at sometimes at very mundane things and finding beauty, order, light, something else underlying it. Which brings me to what you're doing right now. I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about your life as a painter at this point, and in addition to what your life looks like with that, what's happening in your studio.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm a professor at the University of Arkansas, and I have a lot of things pulling on my time. So finding ways to manage that. I try for balanced days, most days when I can afford it. So that's I'm doing some sort of, domestic chores most days. I'm trying to paint most days, almost every day, even if I can only afford, like 15 minutes. which is a lot of days these days, as I'm also an administrator this year. I usually do some form of writing. I mean, that could be applying to things or writing my sketchbook or writing an email. I do find it fun sometimes to craft beautiful emails that aren't just businessy, but say things in a beautiful way. And then, some sort of relaxation. I seem to do best with that. I mean, my ideal situation would be a day that has all of that, but the painting portion of that day is more like 6 or 8 hours. That would be lovely. That's a good stretch for me. My office, which I'm in right now, which is also my studio, is directly across from my classroom, or my, one of the primary painting classrooms. So that's just the way I've done it for a number of years. Like, always tried to carve out the space to paint where I need to also be to work, so that I can be constantly, I don't want to be a foreigner stepping into my own studio. I don't want that feeling. I've had that feeling, and it kind of sickens me.
Yeah. It feels unfamiliar, right? You're like,
yeah.
wait, what was happening in here? What was I doing? Where is this? And it doesn't feel like your space that you're inhabiting. I think that's such a great thing to share, is having your studio close to where your other responsibilities are located. I think I've talked to a lot of artists who really want to have these amazing studios, which of course we all do. And you still have an amazing studio. I've seen pictures of it. It's quite nice. But there may be something to be said about proximity over having to commute to the beautiful studio. You know what I mean? Like being familiar, and also just what you're talking about, the demands on your time as an artist today. We have so much that's in our laps.
Yeah, it's a compromise. It's a compromise for sure, but it's one that makes sense for me. To keep it constantly. I like to keep some degree of momentum in the studio, regardless of what's going on.
So I would love to hear in those 6 to 7 hour days and stretches that you have, like what that looks like for you in the studio. But I'd also like to hear, when you can only pop in for 15 minutes, like what becomes your priority in that moment?
Yeah. So, for the longer stretches, I often have on Star Trek on headphones, but the screen is way over there and super tiny. But I do really like listening without commercials to just episode after episode of the Starship Enterprise's hum of conversation and the warp drive. Sometimes baseball I like having on. I used to other shows too, Andy Griffith's Show or The Office or Curb Your Enthusiasm, but also music and podcasts. But I kind of keep a constant chatter.
I have to ask, the Andy Griffin Show, that kind of feels like the one out of left field. Tell me more about that. I'm just curious.
It's a great show. I know it feels old. It's very old fashioned in many ways, but it's like one of the best workplace comedies ever. Barney Fife, hilarious character.
Very true.
And I just grew up with it, so I know all the episodes. So I just can listen and know exactly what's going on. I did feel, it does feel good though to have a degree of, like, I don't listen to books on tape or anything because I have to focus on them. But if it's just my own thoughts, I don't know. I find that I get all worked up. It's almost like a salve or something to listen to this stuff that just kind of keeps a sound and a momentum going, and I don't get too worked up.
Yeah, it keeps it moving. It keeps it moving. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a couple of friends who have listened to the same the same playlist for like 15 years at this point.
Yeah.
Because it's not really about the music anymore. It's about just the familiarity. And maybe it also kind of trains us in a way to like get into that headspace. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm here. This is what I'm listening to. I've done it before, and it kind of just gets things moving,
Yeah. And then to build on that idea, I have costumes too. I mean, they're work clothes, but like I have some jackets and hats that allow me to transform into, painter. And then I actually have subdivided that so that I have other outfits that allow for, aggressive, make big changes kind of painter, or surgical, really focus in and try to like be precise about one aspect of the painting. It's literally a changing of the hats that
That's
helps me
fascinating.
just psychologically bring a different thing or switch into that mode.
I find that fascinating actually to hear. Do you feel like you have like a painting persona? Like that's part of you as an artist? Like there is like Neil the painter, and that is taking on
Sure.
almost like different points of view potentially, or something that's different than like Neil, person out in the world.
I guess maybe a little bit. I
Huh.
mean, they're pretty integrated, but I do feel like I don't want to do this administrating thing forever,
Yeah.
because I can feel it. I also have that ability to be organized and to communicate and be responsive to stuff, but I don't want it to take over. That is a thought that I had, which made me think, yeah, maybe I do have personas. Maybe
Mhm.
you're onto something, that like, there's a certain Jekyll Hyde situation and I'm trying to keep the balance.
I'm really
Yeah.
interested in the idea of a painting persona. I've thought about it previously in terms of like, the background you're describing of growing up kind of middle class comfort, Boy Scout, church, all of these things. And then, you're a father doing, so there's like a way of being this responsible person in society. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
similar in that.
Yeah.
And then there's things that you're saying in your work that may or may not always jive with that. And like, do we need to put on that different hat in order to not be brave, but like to potentially help us explore those other
Mhm.
areas, I don't know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I feel like that. I feel like if I just was a painter all the time, though, I might get just sad.
yeah.
There's something about teaching that is like a good social space, an organized social space for me. Also, being out there and doing administrative or community service or things like this kind of keep me happy, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't
Like
want to just be a hermit. I think I have hermit tendencies that I need to protect myself against.
yes, that makes so much sense hearing that. Like it's so great to go get those 6, 7 hour days and put on the painting hat or like the precision hat and all of that. But there's also a relief in being able to take that off at times, where you can, have these other spaces that you're into. And I think as artists, we were given this myth of what it meant to be an artist, that you always had to have that hat on in order to be able to, like, I don't know, be a
Right.
whatever. And I think that was so untrue and kind of did us a disservice. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like that romantic ideal of, yeah, of someone who, because now that you're grown up, you know that that person, if they exist, they're an asshole, that someone's taking care of everything for them. And like,
Exactly.
you don't want to be that person. Like maybe you want to be free and be an artist all the time, but you don't want to be just a jerk.
Yes.
So I think for most of us, it's a balance. Um, yeah.
So let's go into putting on the artist hat. And when you hit those 6 or 7
Okay.
hour days, what's like like, how do you approach that day? Do you have like things that you typically do, or not a system, but things that you're
Yeah.
accustomed to set up?
Yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. I often start by straightening up. That helps me get moving. And and then color is really usually, or not usually, but often leading the way. Like I have a sense of color mixing and going for a specific thing that I'm going to be working on, and that's a great way. It's like a pretty non-verbal way of starting. You're just sort of thinking about and responding to color and color relationships. So setting the palette, I mean, I guess that's a little bit of a discipline, to your point, because teaching has afforded me this opportunity to test out all my ideas. Like if I say it to the students, I better practice it. And I found myself saying that, you know, your color in your painting is going to be reflective of what your palette looks like. So if you have a chaotic palette, your painting color is going to be chaotic. But if you have a sort of idea and some sort of systematic way of structuring your ideas around color. So I keep a pretty tidy palette. And I do a lot of pre-mixing so that when I'm in the flow, putting marks on the surface, it's easy to feel rushed and to cheat on color, you know, to just sort of reach for what's available and not. So the discipline is to set the palette so that you're making good color decisions as you go. And you're able to work faster too.
When you're pre-mixing your colors, and this kind of goes into, you know, how you work through your painting, are you looking at still life or something that you want to work on, or where are you getting the colors that you want to pre-mix, or is it based on a painting or?
Right. Yeah, so we could do a whole podcast on that alone, because I have a lot of thoughts about the difference between perceptual color relationships and invented color relationships. It's a way I make sense of the really broad painting world out there. It could separate people into those two camps, sort of. And I'm definitely more on the perceptual color relationship spectrum, but I kind of get at it I have a big, I love color. I have a lot of oil paint, tons of oil paint, many, many colors. And then as I get into a painting, I reduce it way down. So I'm always finding new limited palettes that sort of are making sense to me on some sort of emotional level, but also like connected to the zeitgeist, the moment, and also responding to a thing that I'm looking at. But, you know, you could paint a thing that you're looking at with any number, the same way you could play music with a piano or an orchestra or a jazz flute. You know, you can observe color relationships and match them with any number of invented or found interesting, personalized, limited palettes. So yeah, so some ways that feels like the metaphor is real for me, like setting a key, a musical key, is choosing or settling on a limited palette for a particular painting.
With the palettes that you kind of discover and you decide, okay, I'm going to potentially work with this palette more. I'm always curious, like, are you an artist who writes down like your color mixes, or do you do more of like a swatch, or neither? It's just memory.
Yeah, I try to write down notes. I keep a sort of a studio sketchbook / journal. So I'm regularly sketching in there the painting I'm working on and figuring out maybe a few compositional things. And then also writing in words, you know, what the palette is, or maybe a color I want to add, or thoughts on color, or just then thoughts generally. This is another thing I encourage students. There seems to be thoughts that occurs to a painter while they're painting, that when you're sitting at a computer screen trying to write your artist statement are just not available to you.
Yeah.
So to capture the language as you're making, so it's out, there's a pencil right there, the sketchbook is out, so that as I have a thought, I just start jotting them down. And then that's usually how I start writing other things, art statement type things.
Excellent. So, you know, I like how you're talking about these like different ways of approaching color in some ways, like the perceptual camp versus like, you know, inventive world. So I want to dive in a bit more into your perceptual paintings, because I think one of the things I find really interesting in your work is that, you know, you have these perceptual paintings, but then you kind of have these other paintings. And I'm wondering, like, are they based on perception? Are they invented? Like, where are those paintings kind of coming from in relation? So I'd love to hear a bit about that approach for you.
Yeah, it was, I very much schooled in the perceptual painting, still life, portrait, figure painting, match what you see. that's super interesting to me. The whole take 3 dimensions and turn it into 2, and what edges do, and all the subtle shifts in color. I mean, I think that's my bread and butter. But then there, so to a degree, I think I got a little bored. Not that it's easy at all, not that kind of bored, but just a sense of like wanting something new. There was a sense of, I never could succeed in abstraction before. I always felt like I didn't have the chops, or there's something off about that. I couldn't quite access it. And then when I discovered, but it felt like a discovery, but just this idea that perceptual color could be the thing that was really what was holding me back. Color. I can't invent color very well. When I invent color in an abstract painting or just anywhere, it feels wrong to me. It feels like it's lacking nuance. There's not enough of a driving force that makes for more interesting combinations than I could have invented. And so the abstract paintings are very true to life in terms of color relationships. And I'll capture them in a painting from life, or I'll just do a little color mixing, or sometimes now I just even take notes because I can mix color in my head pretty well. And then the forms are very minimalist and abstracted, and if they feel much more like I'm able to access them and play around with things, because the color is the structure that kind of holds me. So as a result, I feel like most of the abstractions are kind of landscapey based, or although some are from figures, but I don't know. I think that was the key for me. That's the link. And I think superficially, like you're seeing connections there, but sometimes I've heard people say, oh, your paintings are so different now. You know, what's going on? Like thinking I'm in crisis or something. And like, actually, it's very much a continuation. I just made this one tweak where I noticed something, a form in the world or a landscapey, a moment where the light's doing something, and I capture the color, but then I can reinvent the forms in the studio.
You know, I feel like you're describing, no, I don't want to say crisis, but this path that I think a lot of painters end up having to walk, and not choose the direction that they're going to go left or right, but when you are trained and work from observation and are a perceptual painter, you know, like finding a path forward when you decide, I love perceptual painting, but I don't know if it's my thing anymore, you know? And I think, I know for myself, I really struggled with that. I feel like it's almost like leaving a religion of sorts.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about
Yeah.
that experience for you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm still in it. I'm still in the religion. That's one thing. I still think it's the best way to learn painting. It's such a driver when you're making a painting, and then you look at the world and realize, oh, there's so much more there that I can put into the painting. You're not having to come up with that yourself. So to get familiar with the materials and, you know, really get your skills trained up, that's still the best way. There's perceptual painting. Like I went to Indiana University in the early 2000s, and it was kind of a great moment for that. It was a very vibrant and kind of painting, and a lot of it was focused on perceptual painting. And then there are these other programs that like you could be a perceptual painter, and then you could kind of go to the certain academies or conservatories or ateliers. And so there was that world, and I really appreciate that kind of painting. And there's some painters that come out of there that just blow me away. And I just feel like, oh my gosh, they really took this thing to the max right now. And it's like, it's incredible. And I sort of felt, oh, I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. I'm not really going to go fully that way. And then a lot of the other paintings that come out are just boring. And then there's like the contemporary art world, which isn't fully in, it somewhat overlaps the perceptual painting world, but it's much more into conceptual thinking. But I found that some of that work is just so slick, and I'm not interested in that. So I do find myself feeling at for a while, I felt like I was doing it wrong. Like I was supposed to make a choice and go fully into a camp. But now kind of happily finding my own way, feeling like I have some interesting ideas around what contemporary painting is and could be, and then also feeling like I have a skill set that matches kind of a realist perceptual painting world. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a happy place to be, kind of straddling those two things.
Yeah, and I think that's what is really interesting to me. I think that there are these artists, again, we keep talking about being in the midst of something and then being able to reflect on it, you know. And you know, when you were at IU was around the time that I was doing perceptual painting as well. And there's like these really incredible teachers that people would go to and work with, and they were like these stars, you know. And I think we were so informed by them. And you're right. Then there's like this contemporary art world of concept, which I'm not anti-concept, but some of it is just like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
exhausting.
it's when it's didactic, which it almost always. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a painting and then read the concept statement or something and then liked the painting because of that. Like it just doesn't make sense to me that the painting is didactic, because it's like, are you sure? It's such an abstract, ambiguous thing, painting. It's not a direct, it's direct. That's not the right way of saying it. It's just not completely clear in a painting. You might have clear intentions as the painter, and some painters really need concept as the driving force. But then it's really up to the viewer to figure the rest out. Like you can't tell someone what a painting is about. You can tell them why you made it. You can tell them about your process, and those things can have meaning and could sort of contextualize. But it doesn't work, I don't think, to just say, here's the painting and then here's the concept. And there's almost always this chasm for me between them, where I'm just like, okay, I guess I disagree or I don't like it. I'm not sure, but I'm moving on, you know?
Yeah, yeah. You're like, and I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's such an interesting place to be, I think. I feel like there's not a rebirth of painting because I don't think it ever died or anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's this energy that seems to be happening uh in people really wanting to have a conversation as a viewer of a painting or a conversation of making a painting. So having it
Mhm.
with the process that I think is really heartening for me personally.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like, you know, that's one thing I really pick up on your work, and something I really enjoy seeing is that touchstone of perceptual painting, but then this investigation of I feel like it's kind of talking about the world right now, where we're at in it, you know, what we see, what we don't see. And it you kind of touched on this when we were talking to David. I'm kind of curious about, like, are those things that you're thinking about, and does that impact how long you're working on a painting? We were talking about weird stuff happening in our paintings, and I want to hear
Yeah.
about the weird happening in your paintings.
Yeah. 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 So to the first part, yeah, I agree. Painting's not dead. It's not going to ever die. That'd be like saying poetry is dead or soul food is dead or something. Like we just want, and I think we were going to want it more and more and more, a really human expression, like a just raw human being human, and you can sense the human thing. I think that's going to become like more and more important. And of course, not just painting doing that, but I think it's going to become, yes, we're going to crave it. So I do think about the role of painting in society a lot, and like how my paintings maybe could serve that better. That's what I've been thinking about lately. So that's not so weird. That's more like the Boy Scout of me, I guess. To try to serve humanity. The
what's your takeaway on that? What are your thoughts on it?
On
your
what?
serving society. I'm interested. I want to hear
Oh
more.
yeah. Well,
I in society. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did the Studio Break gallery. I love the idea of an alternative gallery space, where it's really not a commercial space. And I'm on my local library's art committee, and they just accepted my proposal to do a huge painting for the library. So they're not going to pay me. I don't care about that. But I just thought that's a democratic space where I feel like I'm interested in putting my efforts towards a big, doing something significant for the community in a space like that. But so just generally thinking about where paintings could and should live to do the most good. Like I mean, museums are great too. But I don't know so much about, some commercial galleries are great, but some of them get me down. And it's not so much about that. It's just really about finding, like, if I was creatively thinking about where I want paintings to live, libraries and like national park lodges would be the highest on my list. If you're out in nature and you go into this magnificent lodge and then you see a magnificent painting in there and your tax dollars paid for the whole thing, so you feel like some ownership of it, like, wouldn't that be great?
Yes, I love that. It's like going back to what was happening, with the murals and being able to have those in certain spaces where we could see these art pieces and have a narrative potentially, or a conversation, and we could read into it. Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, part of my research for this painting at the library, I've been looking up Guston's WPA murals, because I'm a big fan of Philip Guston too. And yeah, they're incredible. I'm just trying to get some ideas for, like, not specifically the forms or anything, but like, what is the mood here? Like the ones that I feel that I like, there's definitely kind of an energy and a kind of a positivity to those successful murals, but they're also refined. They're not silly at all. They're not aggressive or in your face. Not that kind of energy. It's more like we're all rowing the boat the same direction kind of feeling.
Yeah, I think what you just said there too also made me think of some of the reasons that in the art world with the conceptual work, it's like so in your face, one note, where I'm like, man, I am so over things being in my face. Like that is our culture right now, is aggressive in your face all the time.
Yeah.
And we just like have that moment of refinement and just response, and a place you can sit and contemplate, like
yeah, that's what I'm into right now. I really want to create or help create, because our library is amazing in Fayetteville, like top notch. So I'm just really helping, a drop in the bucket. But yeah,
I love that. It makes me think of like Rothko's chapels too, or a chapel that go in and have like this space. Like I don't want to say safe space exactly, but like a space where you can just be, that's
well, that was a big picture. I don't know if we want to talk specific paintings. Was that also part of your question?
Well, I think that kind of just brought me to I love hearing about that in terms of what you're working towards, and role of paintings today, or what it could be. And I'm curious because in our conversation with David, it sounds like you can really work back into a painting, right?
Yeah, I love that.
I do too. And I want to hear a little bit about that, like working back into a painting, how the weird things can kind of happen for you. Like
Yeah.
how does that occur in your process?
Yeah. It's, yeah, it was, fought against it. And then I thought I was like, oh, this is a huge problem that it takes me so long. And now I think it's a strength. And so I'm kind of leaning into the idea. I work on many paintings at once, and they take me a long, long time, like years. I'll usually work on them a week or a day or maybe a month at a time. And then it sort of sets it like a rests for a while and my attention goes elsewhere. And then I'll come back around. And it's interesting to me. The motivation is like, there's the kind of self-portrait where you look in a mirror or take a photograph and you just see your image in that moment. But then there's this other kind of self-portrait, which is where I'm feeling like these paintings feel like where they've been processed through the Neil machine or whoever the painter is. And if they take long enough, and there's like, you know, a certain Neil shows up one day and then I'm in a different mood or I have a new idea. And the key was like, then I'm going to try to put that in the same painting. I'm not going to start a new painting, but I'm going to change the one I have and like add something to it or another layer or adjust it here or there. And then they start to feel like really weird self-portraits, even though I might not be in them, but they definitely feel like nobody else could make that thing. That it's been, the word, I said weird a few times, but the word I'm hitting on lately is idiosyncratic as like an extremely important criteria for me. And then also just as I'm looking at paintings, and I think of it as different from originality. Similar, but different. It's like originality feels to me like you're trying to be original. But if you're just embracing all your idiosyncrasies freely and honestly, it has maybe some degree of originality, but it just kind of organically happened or it's inescapably happening in the process. So you know, they've gotten weird. They're in some ways, I have like a figure paintings of my son, and then I did these like weird color moments on top of them, very abstract moments. I have this painting right now of my son in a hoodie, but it's from a little painting I did of him, but then I recreated it with a wooden mannequin. And I tried to recreate this light from Iceland, which is where I did the original painting. And then I put a dog leash in his hand and I turned him into a girl. That was the first thing. He's like he's got a long blonde wig. I can't tell you where those ideas came from. It's just sort of like, oh, that sounds fun. It's like an impulse, you know? And then I've just learned to be like, okay, before I get in my own way, let's just see if I can incorporate this impulse with these other impulses. And then through just sort of sheer stick-to-itness and maybe a bit of skill, like resolve the thing. And,
That brings up like a whole other topic that I have been thinking about a lot recently, which is resolving a painting. Like,
yeah.
you know, I think we all kind of have like a feeling where it's like, you know, resolved. But I would love, like, you seem very I don't want to say technical, that's not, but you're very organized, you know, in terms of like writing about your work, responding to the work, etc. You have a color theory that you're working out of that allows you to work inventively, but also from observation and perceptually. So when it comes to working towards like a resolved painting, like what are your thoughts on that? Like what, if you had to say what it was, is a resolved painting for you?
Yeah, I've been trying to pinpoint it because, and I like the word resolved or resolution, not finished or polished or I'm done with it, but finding some resolution. And so what I just kind of rattled on about it feeling idiosyncratic, that's one. It needs to surprise me. It needs to be like, oh my goodness, what has happened? How did I do that? That's strange, but also, you know, but unique in a way. But then just spatially, and with the, I do like this thing where we make 2 dimensions look like 3 dimensions in some form in painting. I think that's a profound magic trick that has been appealing to painters for a long, long time, or to anybody looking. I think it's a fun magic trick. So that then helps me organize a sense of thoughts around what I want the light to do. Like I have to have idea around that. If there's a certain kind of atmosphere, I kind of have to have a sense for what I'm shooting for there. All those formal elements to add up to some sense of space and light. I know I can be better at quitting when that happens, or stopping a painting, not quitting, or stopping an area of a painting. I definitely I can get into the overly resolved, overly rendered thing sometimes. I'm trying to find, I think working abstractly is helping me to be a little bit more minimal and to find where I want the focal points. I think of it as like a focal point, like a crispy area, you know, where the resolution is feeling very like solid. I think I'm getting better at identifying those and letting other parts be a little bit more, I wouldn't say loose because my painting is not loose, but a little bit more open.
I like that. So we just kind of touched on like what a resolve painting is for you. And now I'd like to hear like, how do you start a new painting? Like, how does that happen for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I think, thanks for sending the questions a little bit because I do like to prepare. And I wrote one response out, like a few notes, and then I thought, no, that's not right. I think the key for me is impulse, which I looked up: a sudden, strong, and unreflective urge or desire to act. And when I have an impulse for what I want a painting to be, that feels like the beginning. And it only lasts like a flash of a moment. That's the beginning. And then everything else, mostly everything else, is like the messy middle. And I like to extend the messy middle. So when I have an impulse, I might be in a restaurant and you know, jot down on a piece of paper or napkin, or type in my phone, or take a photograph, some way record the impulse. And that to me is the beginning. And sometimes that happens in the studio, you know, also just I have a lot of surfaces around, which is something I try to get students to do too, so that different sizes, prepared, ready to go. So if something occurs to me, I can grab it and make some marks, and then that's the beginning. And then really most of the painting is all in this process of like problem solving, you know, adding additional thoughts, additional impulses, and kind of keeping it going, and then solving those problems as I go. But the action really is the messy middle. So I think of the beginning as a small window of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like so the impulse, the idea is in your mind, obviously, and it's like perfect in that moment, you know. And as soon as you start taking that idea and meshing it with the physical world, it becomes a compromise. Like the idea doesn't ever come out quite right. So most of the painting is like dealing with that, trying to hang on to maybe the impulse, the idea, but negotiating it with the physical world.
I really love hearing about, you know, discussing the impulse where, yeah, something kind of comes to you and that's where it starts. You do a sketch, you write something. And I feel like there's painters who enjoy starting a painting more or finishing a painting more? Maybe not.
Mhm.
But do you feel like you fall in one of those camps?
Middle. I'm the middle.
In the middle? You're in the middle? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's weird that I found a correlation with this, was just how I play chess. I'm terrible at the endings. I just cannot get so systematic. There's certain systems where you know the pieces on the board, there's a way that you can win if you know how to do it. And you have to memorize in the beginnings, the openings. And I kind of have a little sense of how to do that, but I'm never very good at it. But I'm much better in the mid game in chess. And I was like, when I realized that, I thought, oh goodness, this is something I'm learning about myself. It's coming out in multiple ways.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how painting really does teach you about yourself when you reflect on it and look at it? You're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, like these are my tendencies. And it's not just in the studio, it's in other areas as well. You
Yeah.
know, you're talking about being really reflective and thinking about things deeply. And that doesn't just happen in your paintings. I'm sure it happens in whatever is going on in the world around you or questioning something, you know.
Mhm.
Which kind of brings me to one of my last questions, which is, was there any advice? I love that you were at IU and all these other places. Was there
Mhm.
any advice that you received, or maybe somebody taught you along the way, that has helped you, or that you continue to kind of go back to in your art practice?
Mhm. Yeah, I have many answers to this. So,
Oh, great.
but I thought I'll tell one fun story
Yeah.
that sticks with me. This was in graduate school at Rutgers, and we had Elizabeth Murray as a visiting artist. And I don't know if listeners know what she looked like, but she was striking. Big curly gray hair and kind of like horse teeth, like big teeth. And what I didn't know at the time is that she was also not very well. This was near the end of her life, and she was tough, man. She was so tough. So I had her in the studio, and she looked at my paintings. I'm sure she said some nice things and asked questions, but I don't remember any of that. But I remember is at the end, she got up real close to me with those teeth, and I remember she poked me in the chest, and she said, if you're going to be a painter, you have to get better at painting things. She poked me. And it's like, what is that? It's like kind of not a very deep comment, I thought. But then the more I thought about it, I think she was saying the materiality of the paint, the quality of the painting, like these things matter a lot. And I started looking at her work and thinking about, the lovely, thick, crusty, all the interesting painting moves that she makes. They're fantastic to look at up close. And I think at that moment in time, I was painting pictures,
Yeah.
and I wasn't painting paintings, and I wanted them to look better up close.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what she meant, but that's how I interpreted it. And that, as you can overthink a lot of things, And so as I'm overthinking the painting, I'll often come back to that thought. Make sure it looks good when you get up close to it. Make sure the paint feels good to people,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love the poke too.
Yeah. Yeah, she was tough. I don't think we make people like Elizabeth Murray anymore.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's interesting how there was these really tough painters, who were steel, and it may just be a cultural shift or what, but I don't know if we should have them now, not have them now. I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
I also am kind of getting this sense that to continue to be a painter, um, for the long haul, you really do have to have this balance of kind of love for the world, or being able to look at the world and not make snap judgments, rather respond. But
Mm-hmm.
also you've got to be tough, because it's a lot of people are going to kind of come at you and be like, why this, why that
Mm-hmm.
can't be part of it. So there has to be a bit of toughness to protect kind of your vision, or your work, or what you're
Mm-hmm.
interested in, like this
Mm-hmm.
quality. So I don't know.
Yeah, people used to talk about painters having to suffer, like you have to suffer for your work. I don't think that's quite right. There's some truth to that, but I think it's more about liking feeling uncomfortable.
Mhm.
It's sort of a softer version of suffering.
Yeah.
But painters, you should like to feel uncomfortable. You're always trying to figure it out as you go. And if you get too formulaic, it usually doesn't work. So you're having to reinvent the formula all the time, and that makes you feel very dumb and lost. And you know, you have to kind of like that, I think, to keep at it.
Yeah, it's true. There's always something else to find, you know, like in a painting that you're going to go through.
Mhm.
Is there anything else? You said you had a lot, and so I love this story. The other to bring
Yeah,
up, you know, bring them on. We'd love to hear them.
the because I made a presentation for an academic conference about recently this October about Indiana University's painting culture in the early 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s. That is, you know, referred to as the golden age of IU painting, kind of as a joke, but also maybe it was kind of true. It just was very big and robust at that time. And so I entered in as an undergraduate, and I was really into painting, but then they had these open critiques for all the graduate students, all the undergrads, and it was like every Tuesday night. And, you know, there would be 50 people in the room, a lot of professors, the community would show up, the pharmacist from Kroger's would show up with like a case of beer. That was like his payment for attending these things. And just hearing people like dig into these paintings and disagree with each other, have different frameworks for interpreting the work and passionately you know, arguing. They were supportive too, but they were also pretty dramatic. And that just, hearing people's opinions about painting, it just occurred to me, I should have some of those. I should develop some too. And I don't know if I would have gotten there without an examples, you know, so many clear examples of how people go about formulating their opinions. You know, it's their opinions. It's not an objective thing, painting. You could maybe find some areas that it is, but it's mostly subjective, but it ties into like psychology and the world and history. And so to use it as a way to formulate, to use painting as a way to formulate bigger ideas and have strong opinions was, I think that was the final thing for me to make me know this was my life now. I already love the act of painting, but then the interpretation and the discussion around painting also was equally as fascinating to me. So I really credit that. I think, like we were talking about, the culture is maybe softer now. Critique isn't as harsh, and I think that's good on many fronts. Good. I hope we find the perfect balance someday, where you know, level honest truths at each other without it feeling like an attack, or without it being an attack, because there was that too. Sometimes people were using critique to take out their issues. That's a part I'm glad is maybe gone away. But yeah, just to be able, it's a social time for painters. We all work in our studios alone usually, and the moment of community is when we gather and critique.
I actually went to one of those.
Oh yeah, the IU crit.
Yeah.
Oh,
I showed up, and it was pretty interesting. That being said, can we find this talk that you gave anywhere, like online or anything?
oh,
Are you?
I've been meaning, I have the slide deck and I have my notes, and I interviewed a bunch of people for it, and I promised them I would send them a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe this summer I'll get to polishing it to a point where I can send it around. I want to write maybe an essay,
Yeah.
just and with photos from the, you know, 90s accompanying it. But yeah, maybe someday.
I think that would be really interesting. I know a lot of people that would enjoy reading that or listening to it or whatever you did, because it was such a giant in
Yeah,
the you know,
there was a lot of force to that program. I
yeah,
mean, you were getting swept along in the structure of it, but then just as osmosis, it was just around you and you were picking up. There was just enough. I like being around a lot of painters, and there was
yeah,
a lot of them. And
yeah.
so you're always just picking stuff up, and that was wonderful.
Mhm. Oh man. Well, thank you so much, Neil. This has really been a pleasant conversation about painting, history of painting, what you think of it, where it's going, and so much more. Before we jump off of here, can you just share where we can find you online? So if people want to see more paintings, of course, we'll share them over on our side, but if they want to find and
Yeah,
contact you.
yeah, this was a pleasure for me too. I'm at neilcallander.com, and then on Instagram, and now on Blue Sky. I haven't posted yet, but I guess things are going that direction for a lot of us, so I tried it out. But neilcallander.com, I try to keep it I keep it up to date, and I have a lot of work on there from the past, not just new stuff.
Great. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Neil, for being on here. This really was a pleasure to connect and chat about your work.
Thank you, Erica.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.